Chapter 1. The Family I Thought I Knew. I never imagined my own family would quietly transfer their debt onto me, not through threats or fights, but through paperwork, silence, and trust. All it took was one bank letter in 2023 for me to realize my name was carrying millions in risk I never agreed to. I'm Marissa, and this is the story of how the people I trusted most decided I was strong enough to carry their burden, and how staying silent almost destroyed my life before I finally chose proof over rage. I live alone now in a quiet apartment in northern New Jersey, the kind of place real estate listings describe as serene. It is clean, organized, predictable. After my divorce was finalized in 2021, I chose it on purpose. No echoes of arguments, no shared furniture, no history clinging to the walls. From the outside, my life looks settled. I am 44 years old, no children, a solid career, no visible drama. The kind of woman people assume will always be fine. At work, I am known as reliable. I manage compliance for a financial services firm in Manhattan, reviewing regulations, assessing risk, making sure problems are addressed before they grow teeth. It is not glamorous work, but it is respected. I am good at it. I am calm under pressure. I do not panic. I do not miss details. People come to me when something needs to be handled correctly the first time. My family has always relied on those same traits. I grew up in a quiet New Jersey suburb in a white colonial house with blue shutters and a lawn my father mowed every Saturday morning. From the street, we looked like a picture of middle-class stability. Two parents who stayed married, a son and a daughter, holiday lights every December, dinner at the table most nights. Neighbors waved, teachers spoke kindly about us. No one ever suspected anything was wrong. Inside the house, things ran on an unspoken hierarchy. My mother, Linda Carter, was the center of it. She never raised her voice, never needed to. She governed through expectation and disappointment, through stories about what good families did and what decent people sacrificed. Every decision was framed as a moral one. She believed deeply in unity, especially when it required someone else to bend. My father, Robert Carter, rarely challenged her. He ran a small construction business for years, worked long days, came home tired, and avoided conflict like it was a second job. When my mother spoke, he listened. When she decided, he agreed. Silence was his way of keeping the peace. My younger brother Mark was 2 years behind me and always a little ahead of consequences. He was charming, confident, restless. He chased opportunity with the certainty that something would eventually work out. When it did not, there was always an explanation. Bad timing, wrong partner, market conditions, someone else's mistake. My parents believed in his potential with a faith that did not require evidence. And then there was me. I was the child who did well in school, who followed rules, who asked practical questions. I learned early how to fill out forms, how to read contracts, how to translate adult conversations into something manageable. When something needed to be explained or fixed or handled properly, it came to me. I was praised for being mature, for being responsible, for understanding things beyond my years. At the time, I thought that meant I was trusted. As I grew older, that role did not fade, it solidified. By my 30s, it was assumed that I would help with paperwork, review documents, explain financial decisions. When my parents needed something signed or organized, they called me. When Mark needed help untangling a mess, it filtered through the family and landed on my shoulders. No one ever forced me, no one demanded outright. It was presented as natural, reasonable, temporary. In 2016, my parents asked me to meet them one evening to talk about the house. Mark was there too, half listening, scrolling on his phone. My mother explained that they wanted to make a small adjustment to the property paperwork. Their credit was not what it used to be. Mine was excellent. Adding my name to part of the documentation would make things easier down the line. She said it was just precautionary, a technical detail, nothing that would change how the house functioned as a family home. It sounded sensible, familiar, safe. We went to a local notary office the following week, beige walls, fluorescent lights, a stack of forms clipped together. I skimmed everything carefully, as I always did. The language looked standard, nothing raised alarms. I signed where indicated. The notary stamped the pages and slid them into a folder. On the drive home, I asked whether I should keep copies for my records. My mother smiled and brushed the question aside. She said we were family. She said we did not need to formalize trust. I let it go. That moment did not feel dangerous. It felt warm. It felt like belonging. Years passed without incident. I advanced in my career. Mark moved from project to project. My parents aged into routines. Holiday dinners continued. Holidays were celebrated. From the outside, nothing changed. But underneath, the expectations around me quietly deepened. When Mark needed help navigating something complicated, I was asked to look it over. When my parents faced paperwork they did not want to deal with, it came to me. I was always thanked, always told how lucky they were to have me, always reminded how capable I was. I wore that praise like armor. I believed it meant love. My marriage began to fracture around that time, though I did not connect the dots until later. I was always tired, always managing something, always available to everyone else. When my husband and I finally separated, it was quiet and mutual. There were no dramatic accusations, just an understanding that we had grown in different directions. After the divorce, my family became more attentive in some ways. My mother checked in frequently. My father asked if I needed anything. Mark made jokes about me re-entering the dating world. On the surface, it was support. Underneath, something shifted. Without a spouse or children, I was seen as unburdened, flexible, available. The requests did not change in tone, but they increased in frequency. I was the one who could help, the one who could handle it, the one who did not have excuses. I did not push back. I told myself this was what strong people did. They carried weight so others could rest. They absorbed pressure without complaint. They made things easier for everyone else. Looking back, I can see how carefully that identity was reinforced. No one ever said, "You have to do this." They said, "Thank you so much for doing this." No one said, "We expect this of you." They said, "We are so grateful you understand." It never felt like coercion. It felt like trust. That's what makes it hard to explain now. Betrayal does not always arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives dressed as normal family life, as reasonable requests, as signatures placed calmly on paper. At the end of those years, before anything truly broke, I remember standing alone in my kitchen one evening, sorting mail, feeling a heaviness I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not fear, just the sense that I was always the one holding things together. I did not feel especially cherished, but I believed I was needed. And for a long time, I believed that was enough.
Chapter 2. The Cracks I Chose Not to See. The first time I felt uneasy, I dismissed it as stress. By 2019, Mark's real estate ventures had become a regular topic at family gatherings. At first, it was spoken about casually, like background noise. Deals took longer than expected, financing fell through, partners backed out at the last minute. My parents framed it as bad luck, nothing more. Markets shifted, things happened. Then the conversations changed shape. Instead of updates, there were meetings. Instead of stories, there were concerns. My mother would ask me to come by after work, her tone careful, reassuring. She always said it would only take a few minutes. It never did. I noticed a pattern before I could name it. Decisions were already leaning in a certain direction by the time I arrived. Papers were stacked neatly on the table. My father sat quietly. Mark paced or scrolled through his phone, looking irritated before anything had even been said. Each request came wrapped in a different explanation. One evening, my mother explained that a lender was nervous and wanted additional assurance. She said it was only on paper, just to keep the loan from becoming an issue. Another time, she said it was about protecting the family name. She worried about how it would look if Mark defaulted on something connected to a property my parents had once helped him with. Another time, she said Mark was under so much pressure that this small adjustment would give him room to breathe. They never asked me the same way twice. I read everything carefully. That never changed. I noticed that the documents were more complex than before. Layers of entities, shifting language around responsibility, clauses that referenced other clauses. When I asked questions, my mother answered calmly. She said this was standard. She said banks were cautious now. She said it was temporary. Mark always looked relieved when I agreed. He thanked me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You always know how to handle this stuff," he said once, rubbing his face. "I do not know what we would do without you." I wanted to believe that meant something. Sometimes I asked for copies after I signed. Sometimes I was told they would be emailed to me. Often, they never were. When I followed up, I was told everything had already been submitted, that there was no need to keep worrying about it. My mother reminded me gently that I trusted her, did I not? I did. What I did not trust was the feeling in my stomach that grew heavier with each conversation. Around that same time, my marriage was quietly unraveling. There was no betrayal, no sudden break, just years of me being tired and unavailable in ways I had not acknowledged. When my husband and I decided to separate in early 2021, it felt strangely calm. We agreed on most things, we signed papers, we moved on. My family responded the way families often do. My mother checked in constantly, bringing food I did not ask for, calling to make sure I was sleeping. My father offered to help with errands. Mark joked about me being single again, as if humor could smooth over discomfort. But something subtle shifted in how they spoke to me. Without a spouse, without children, I was framed as flexible, free, capable of handling more. When requests came, they were accompanied by reminders of how much I had on my plate compared to everyone else, how I could afford to help, how I did not have anyone else depending on me. I did not argue. I told myself this was temporary, that once Mark's situation stabilized, things would ease up. That was when Claire started pushing back in ways I could not ignore. Claire Donovan had been my friend for more than a decade. She worked in human resources and had a way of listening that made you hear yourself more clearly. One afternoon, we met for coffee after work. I told her about another family meeting, another set of documents that made me uneasy without giving me a concrete reason why. She waited until I finished, then asked a simple question that caught me off guard. "Would you sign this if they were not your family?" I laughed reflexively. I said family was different. She nodded, but her expression did not change. Different does not mean safer. It just means you stop asking certain questions. She told me about a situation from years earlier when she had allowed a relative to use her credit to get through a rough patch. She said it started small, with gratitude and reassurance. It ended with her spending years undoing obligations she never meant to take on. "No one forced me," she said. "I agreed because I thought being capable meant being generous." I did not answer her. I changed the subject. But the question followed me home. Not long after that, I ran into Thomas Reed at a professional event. We had known each other casually for years. He was a civil attorney, thoughtful and precise. We talked about work, about rebuilding routines in our 40s, and about how strange it felt to be starting over quietly. I mentioned my family without detail, just enough for him to pause. When financial arrangements get more complex instead of simpler, that usually means something is drifting out of alignment. I asked him what he meant. It doesn't always mean someone is doing something illegal. It sometimes just means no one wants to look too closely at where responsibility is actually landing. He didn't tell me to take action. He didn't warn me directly. He simply told me to pay attention. I thanked him and moved on, telling myself I was being paranoid, that if there were a real problem, I would feel it clearly, that my instincts would scream. Instead, I felt something quieter. So I did what came naturally to me. I organized. I started saving emails. I labeled folders by date and subject. I kept brief notes after conversations, not accusations, just summaries. What was discussed, what was agreed, what felt unresolved. It felt professional, neutral, responsible. I did not confront anyone, I did not accuse, I did not demand explanations. On the surface, nothing changed. Family dinners continued, requests kept coming, always framed with appreciation. My mother still thanked me for being dependable, Mark still promised things would turn around soon, and I still said yes more often than I should have. Looking back, I can see how those years formed a bridge between trust and truth. At the time, I believed I was maintaining peace. I believed I was being careful without being suspicious. I did not realize that the discomfort I was managing was not temporary. It was warning, and the fact that I could finally name it did not bring fear. It was clarity.
Chapter 3. The Truth Hiding in Plain Sight. It was clarity, not relief, not panic, not even anger. Just the sudden, cold understanding that something I had trusted without question had been quietly rewritten while I was looking the other way. I remember sitting at my kitchen table in Hoboken, the late afternoon light slanting across a stack of envelopes I had almost thrown away without opening. One of them was thicker than the rest, addressed to me but clearly not meant for my eyes. The return address belonged to a regional bank I had never personally worked with. At least, not that I could remember. I opened it anyway. Inside was a notice referencing a commercial loan restructure, my name listed not as a reference or a contact, but as a primary guarantor. The amount made my stomach tighten. 7 figures. I read it again, slower this time, tracing every line, every clause. I did not remember agreeing to anything like this. I knew my memory was sharp when it came to contracts. That had always been my advantage, both professionally and within my family. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a clerical error, a misfiled document, something boring and fixable. Still, I did not call the bank right away. Instead, I did what I always did when something felt off. I went back to the beginning. That night, I pulled every document I had saved from 2019 through 2022. Old emails, PDF attachments, scanned signatures, files I had barely glanced at when they first came through because they had arrived wrapped in urgency and family language. Just sign this quickly. The bank needs it by Friday. It is only temporary. We will clean it up later. Later had never come. By midnight, my living room floor was covered in paper. I sat cross-legged, reading line by line, matching dates, checking version histories. The pattern revealed itself slowly, almost politely, each agreement slightly more complex than the last, each addendum shifting responsibility just a little further in my direction. It was not one dramatic betrayal, it was a series of small, reasonable asks that added up to something devastating. I called Samuel Brooks the next morning. Samuel was a forensic accountant I had worked with years earlier on an internal audit case. He was in his early 50s, precise to the point of obsession and allergic to drama. When I explained what I was seeing, he did not interrupt. He listened, then said quietly, "Send me everything. All of it." 2 days later, we sat across from each other in his midtown office, stacks of documents between us. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me the way doctors do before delivering news they know will land hard. "Marissa," he said, "this was not accidental." I felt my shoulders stiffen. "Explain." He tapped one page, then another. These signatures were reused electronically across multiple filings. The metadata shows they were applied after the original agreements were executed. Whoever structured this knew exactly how far they could push without triggering immediate alarms. "So they planned it," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Over time, carefully." I drove to my parents' house that weekend. The familiar suburban street looked the same as it always had. Trim lawns, parked cars, a sense of quiet stability that had once felt comforting. I parked in the driveway and sat there longer than necessary, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my heartbeat steady but heavy. Inside, my mother was in the kitchen. My father sat in his usual chair, watching a muted news channel. Nathan was not there. Lillian was, her eyes red as if she had already been crying. We sat at the dining table. I placed the documents in front of them without ceremony. "Can someone explain this to me?" I asked. My father stared at the papers but did not touch them. My mother folded her hands together. "Nathan was under a lot of pressure," she said finally. "That does not answer my question," I replied. Lillian spoke then, her voice tight. "We did not think it would end up like this. We thought you would be okay." I looked at her. "You thought I would be okay taking on 7 figures of risk without my consent." She dropped her gaze. I turned to my mother. "Did you know what these documents did?" She hesitated, just long enough. She exhaled. "Families do what they need to do to survive," she said, "and you were always the strongest one." The room went very quiet. I realized then that no one was going to apologize. No one was going to admit wrongdoing. In their minds, this was not theft. It was redistribution, sacrifice, something noble even. I stood up. "I am leaving," I said. "We will speak again, but not like this." My father finally looked at me. His voice was low. "You do not have to make this ugly." I met his eyes. "It already is." I drove home in silence. That night I called Thomas Reed. Thomas was a civil attorney I had known since my early 30s. We had met through a mutual client, stayed in touch over the years. When I explained what I had found, he did not sound surprised. "I've seen this before," he said. "Family structures, soft pressure, papered over trust." "What are my options?" I asked. "You can keep absorbing the damage, or you can stop it." I did not answer right away. Over the next few weeks, I became someone my family no longer recognized. I stopped responding immediately. I stopped offering solutions. I stopped smoothing things over. Instead, I documented everything. I saved emails, I requested copies, I asked questions in writing. Nathan called me late one night. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "You know we needed you." I closed my eyes. "You did not need me, you used me." There was a pause. "You always act like you're better than us." I replied, "I act like I deserve consent." He hung up. The truth settled into me slowly, not as rage, but as a recalibration. I had spent years believing my role was to stabilize the family at any cost, to absorb risk because I could, to stay calm because I was capable. What I saw now was that my calm had been mistaken for permission. One evening, after organizing the last of the files, I sat alone on my couch and said the words out loud for the first time. This was betrayal. Not because money was involved, not because of the legal exposure, but because every single person in that house knew I would not agree if asked honestly, and they decided that didn't matter. I did not feel broken. I felt awake. For the first time, I understood that loyalty without boundaries is not love, it's convenience, and I was done being convenient.
Chapter 4. Silence as Strategy. The decision to take legal action did not come with a surge of adrenaline or a dramatic sense of purpose. It came quietly, one evening in early 2024, as I sat at my desk reviewing the same documents for the 3rd time. I realized that nothing new was going to reveal itself. I already understood what had happened. What remained was whether I was willing to live with it. I called Thomas the next morning. He did not try to talk me out of it. He asked measured questions, walked me through the process, explained what a civil action would and would not accomplish. He reminded me that the law did not exist to make people feel better. It existed to clarify responsibility. That was all I needed. The filing itself was unremarkable. Forms submitted electronically, exhibits uploaded, timelines outlined. I signed my name with the same hand that had signed everything else over the years, steady and deliberate. When it was done, I closed my laptop and went to work, spending the day reviewing compliance reports as if nothing in my life had shifted. But something had.
The reaction arrived before the confirmation email finished processing. My mother called first. Her voice cracked as soon as I answered. "How could you do this to us?" she said. "To your own family?" I listened without interrupting. She cried. She talked about betrayal, about loyalty, about how much she had sacrificed as a mother. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, I spoke carefully. "I am handling this through my attorney," I said. "If you need to communicate, you can do so through him." She went silent, then accused me of cruelty, of ingratitude, of choosing money over blood. I ended the call. Nathan did not call. He showed up. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just taken my shoes off when the buzzer rang. I knew it was him before I answered. He stood in the hallway outside my apartment, jaw tight, eyes sharp with something between fear and fury. "You really filed?" he said. "You actually did it?" "Yes," I replied. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, pacing as if the space belonged to him. "You are blowing this out of proportion," he said. "We could have fixed it. You did not have to embarrass us like this." I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "I asked questions for years," I said. "No one answered them honestly." He stopped pacing. "You are acting like a victim," he said. "You always do this. You make everything about you." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw for the first time how unfamiliar he was to me. "I am acting like someone who read what she signed," I said, and understood it. His voice rose. "You know what this does to me." I nodded. "I know exactly what it does." He left without another word. My father never confronted me directly. He stopped answering my calls, then stopped calling altogether. Through relatives, I heard that the stress had affected his health, that he was withdrawn, that he did not understand how things had gone so far. No one mentioned the choices that had brought us there. Lillian took a different approach. She did not speak to me at all. Instead, she spoke around me, vague posts online about loyalty and betrayal, messages passed through extended family, painting me as cold, calculating, selfish. I read none of it directly. Friends sent screenshots out of concern. I asked them to stop. Silence became my default. Not avoidance, strategy. I focused on the case. Samuel worked meticulously, assembling a clear narrative from years of layered financial decisions. He created charts that mapped how liability had shifted over time, how my exposure increased as others decreased. He explained it all patiently, making sure I understood every detail. "This is not about intent," he said during one meeting. "It is about outcome, and the outcome is clear." Thomas prepared the legal arguments with equal care. He reminded me often that courts rarely deliver clean victories. "We are not here to punish anyone," he said. "We are here to correct the record." The hearing took place in Trenton on a gray February morning. The courthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that sharpens every sound. Shoes on tile, papers shifting, breath held. My family arrived together, except for my father. My mother sat rigid, hands folded tightly in her lap. Nathan could not stay still. Lillian avoided my gaze. Judge Eleanor Watkins presided. She was composed, attentive, uninterested in theatrics. She asked questions that cut through emotion and landed on facts. Dates, documents, signatures. When the exhibits were presented, the room grew still. Emails were read aloud, agreements projected onto a screen. The progression was undeniable. What had once been shared responsibility became singular, mine. Nathan leaned toward my mother and whispered something urgently. She did not respond. When he was asked to speak, his voice shook. "I didn't understand it like that," he said. "I thought it was temporary." The judge listened, then asked one question. "Did you review the documents before signing?" Nathan hesitated. "I trusted that it was handled," he said. That was the moment I saw it clearly.
Nathan had been reckless, but he had also been shielded for so long that he stopped questioning who paid the price. He was not innocent, but he was not the architect either. My mother spoke next. She framed her decisions as protective, necessary, maternal. Judge Watkins acknowledged her concern without endorsing it. Protection that transfers harm is not protection, she said, calmly. The hearing ended without a ruling. The judge requested additional review. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing it in, feeling no triumph, no regret. That evening, I returned to my apartment alone. I made a simple dinner and ate standing at the counter. The space felt different, not emptier, but clearer. For the first time in years, I was not preparing to absorb the next impact. I was not rehearsing explanations. I was not holding everything together. Not because it had been resolved, but because I stopped holding it together.
Chapter 5. What I Kept, What I Lost. The decision arrived quietly, the way most final things do. It was a Tuesday morning in March of 2025. Rain tapped against my kitchen window as I opened my laptop, expecting another routine workday. Instead, there was an email from Thomas waiting for me, marked simply as Update. I read the attached ruling once, then again, slower the second time, letting the language settle. The court found that the financial burden placed on me had exceeded what was reasonable and equitable. Responsibility was reassigned. Obligations were clarified. Certain losses would remain unrecovered, but future liability would not follow me. I closed the laptop and sat there with my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. I did not cry, I did not smile. What I felt was something steadier than either, a sense that the ground beneath me had finally stopped shifting. The aftermath did not unfold in dramatic scenes or loud confrontations. It arrived in absences. My mother did not call, not that day, not the next. Weeks passed without a word. The silence felt deliberate, not wounded, as if she had decided that withholding herself was the last form of control she had left. My father faded quietly from the edges of my life. Through extended family, I heard that he had sold what remained of his construction business and spent most days at home. No one said whether he regretted anything. No one said whether he understood how things had ended. I stopped asking. My brother lost credibility in his professional circle. In real estate, reputations unravel faster than contracts, and public records do not forget. Deals dried up, calls went unanswered. He tried to reach out once, months later, leaving a message that sounded uncertain, unfinished. I did not return it. His wife moved away not long after. A clean break, according to the rumor, a need for a fresh start. I understood the instinct, even if I no longer felt responsible for accommodating it. No one emerged victorious. That mattered to me more than I expected. There was no moment where karma announced itself with flair, no scene where the balance tipped cleanly in my favor. What happened instead was quieter. Everyone was left to live inside the consequences of their choices without the comfort of someone else absorbing the impact. In the weeks that followed, I thought often about what this experience had revealed, not just about my family, but about the roles women like me are taught to inhabit. Women in their 40s, competent, reliable, emotionally contained. We become the infrastructure of families, the steady beams others lean on without noticing the strain. Our stability is mistaken for infinite capacity, our silence for consent. I had spent years believing that love looked like availability, that strength meant endurance, that setting boundaries was a form of selfishness I should avoid. The truth was harder and simpler. I had confused being needed with being valued. One evening, a few months after the ruling, I met Claire for dinner at a small restaurant near her apartment. The lighting was low, the kind that makes time feel unhurried. We ordered food we both liked without discussing it first. That alone felt like progress. She studied me across the table for a long moment before speaking. "You seem different," she said. I nodded. "I feel different. Not hardened, not bitter, just clearer." We talked about the years ahead, about aging, about how much of our lives had been shaped by expectations we never consciously agreed to. Claire told me she had started saying no more often at work and with her own family. She said it felt uncomfortable but honest. "Discomfort is not the same as danger," she said. I smiled. "I am still learning that." When we stood outside the restaurant afterwards, she hugged me tightly. "You are allowed to keep yourself," she said. The words stayed with me long after we parted ways. Back in my apartment, I began to take stock of what I had lost and what I had kept. I lost the illusion of a unified family. I lost the comfort of being indispensable. I lost relationships that could not survive transparency. What I kept mattered more. I kept my integrity. I kept my financial independence. I kept the ability to make decisions without bracing for emotional retaliation. I kept quiet mornings and evenings that belonged only to me. Most of all, I kept my voice. I no longer softened my language to protect other people from discomfort. I no longer signed anything without understanding exactly what it meant. I no longer apologized for asking questions. Revenge was never my goal. I did not want anyone to suffer. I wanted clarity, accountability, an end to the slow erosion of consent disguised as love. Choosing myself did not make me cruel. It made me whole. If you are listening to this and recognize something familiar in it, if you are the one everyone relies on, the one expected to carry what others drop, I want you to hear this clearly. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Asking for fairness is not aggression. Choosing yourself does not mean you never cared. It means you stopped disappearing. If this story resonated with you, if it echoed something you have lived or are living now, I invite you to stay here. There are more stories like this, stories about quiet strength, about dignity over drama, about proof instead of rage. You are not alone in learning where your responsibility ends. And neither was I.